this is the Every Man Can podcast based on mental strength, how we can use it in our everyday lives, interviewing local people, using their experience, their wealth of experience through their personal journeys and their own professional journeys, how they use it for themselves, how they use it for other people, and hopefully you can take something from it. We hope you enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Every Man Can podcast with me, Matt, and Richie Andrew. We are one light today, as Matt Sterland couldn't be with us, and we've spoken in the past, haven't we? If one's missing, we're not going to do it, but Matt was insisting that we did. So he's busy with other stuff that he couldn't get out of, so that's fine. No dedication.
Yeah, you love that one.
Yeah, there's no niceness. How are you?
Mate, I'm really good. I'm a bit tired. It's been a busy few days with everything, basically, whether it's been family and then jumping from one family thing to then running a sauna on the beach for 4 hours and then driving late night to the Lake District with my son to start walking the Wainwrights. So there's the Wainwrights, like 204 peaks in the Lake District, and you can do them in 36 walks, basically. It ranges from like sort of 8 miles to sort of 14-mile walk. So we started that yesterday. I've got about 20 under my belt just from visiting the place and doing that. And I said, do you fancy doing this, like dad and son? Do you know what I mean? Great crack. So like we did a loop yesterday that was about 9 mile, 750 metres of climbing, and we got fairly lucky with the weather through top of the mountain, through some bogs and trying to navigate our way through without falling in the bog and everything. But yeah, great. So I'm stayed at a mate over there, come back this morning, feeling pretty good. Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm actually going to speak about the kick. I know often you do it, but I think obviously you had a lengthy sauna session on the beach Sunday, saw the photos. Sorry couldn't be there.
It's all right.
But looked really good. So that's another thing that you're doing and it's taken off, and I think it's good for your well-being as well.
It is, and it's been a success. Like we had the launch, we've had 2 major sessions now, and I'm booking some more dates. So we've got the Sundays we're going to do fortnightly on Mask Beach. We're going to be doing a Friday night, so end of the week thing that a lot of people have asked for, but it's selling out. So I decided straight away invest in a new tent, sauna, stove, all that stuff. That's all coming together. Just picked some of that kit up actually on the way from the delivery place, on the way back from the lakes, funnily enough. So we've got the podcast, we've got a Fire and Ice community sauna, and then we've got some other projects.
Yeah.
So hoping to get the website up and running by the end of the year, phase 1. And there's some other bits and bobs that we're speaking to some big organisations around training and many other things as well.
It's all good.
It's really all good, and there's like we'll start looking at the beneficiary work. So spoke to our money man about kind of starting to put some money aside from income to start putting into a pot for beneficiary work for men. So we're over the moon. Hopefully be able to do some recruitment in the next 6 months maybe as well. So it's exciting times. Lots going on. And how are you?
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Really, really good weekend. Didn't travel far, my daughter's footy for once, so just spent a lot of time with Isaac and Ivy, and saw Isaac on Friday night. His girlfriend came round, so it was lovely. Something to eat. Yeah, really nice. Just a chilled weekend. Had stuff on Sunday, and went to watch Borough Women on Sunday with Ivy, which was different and good. And yeah, and I'm off because it's term time, and it's my first week of term time only. So 8-mile walk yesterday, 5.5 mile on the beach this morning.
Beautiful.
I'm going to try and get out every day.
Good on you.
Yeah, good.
We know what works for us, don't we, man?
Yeah, man.
We do. I mean, we were talking last podcast, one before this, about like role of good women in men's lives as well, and kind of like the family thing and so on. But there was, like when I came back from the sauna, packed up, I had to clear the van out, get all the sand out of it, brush it all out, clean it out, then load it up and we went to the lakes. Got to the lakes about half midnight, 1 in the morning, slept overnight in the van. But anyway, when I got back, Beck's brought back from her mum two Sunday dinners, 2 roasts for me and Charlie.
Looking after you.
And it was like, we know you're working hard, and here's something for you.
It's all you need.
It's amazing. Still love
good women in our lives.
And whoever, just family, people around us, friends who care, and like just do those extra little things, and it works both ways, doesn't it? We try and do those things when we can for those others as well. So, it's good. It's not without stress. Don't get me wrong. But
no. But just before we introduce our guest, just on that, what works for you. I was talking to a good mate of mine this morning on the phone who's PTSD, out the police. It's like 6-7 months behind my journey, really. So it's like similar thing, and we were chatting for ages, and I was saying to him, like, you don't ever forget, like, when you are feeling good, that you suddenly you think, oh shit, I'm back to where I was. And just, I think when you do have your coping mechanisms and your coping techniques, it's how quickly you can use them to get back. So yeah, I've had a few dips, but yeah. Dog on the beach works wonders.
The gratitude thing really does work, by the way, as well. Like, people, anywhere you are, ever you are in life, you can be grateful for the smallest of things. Like, well, I've got this, and at least I've got this, and actually, this is someone. And sometimes it's just someone who does a small act can make a massive difference. And we always talk about that, don't we? With mental strength, how important it is.
But again, the area we live in, you know, I jumped in the car this morning, dropped my daughter off at her mum's, and then red car, and it was like Spain. I had my shorts on. Sea was just flat.
We're so lucky.
Peaceful, hardly any humans, which does me great.
So I'm stood outside the sauna tent on Mask Beach, and the number of people who come by and are like staying in a holiday home, and a couple I met on the weekend, they were like, oh, we couldn't be further away from the coast. We come here to come and get it. We love the water. We love being around the coast. We love the walks here. It's beautiful. It's like, yeah. Don't tell everyone though.
No.
Yeah.
Sod off.
Yeah.
So, today we are in the Artisan in Linthorpe, beautiful pub. We've just had a chat with the owner, so that'll be tagged onto this podcast. We are with Kimberley Weir. Kimberley, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Your bio, impressive, sent to me this morning. I like it. You are a qualified hypnotherapist dedicated to helping people break free from anxiety and burnout through a powerful blend of psychological therapy, hypnosis and NLP. You're guided by empathy, creativity and spiritual intuition. Your approach creates a safe and supportive path towards lasting peace and resilience. And this all comes from overcoming your own struggles with anxiety and burnout. And you're deeply committed to helping people find clarity, confidence and build mental strength. And whether that's working on a one-to-one, at retreats or in workshops, you craft personalised experience that empowers clients to reconnect with their strength and embrace meaningful change.
You can see why, when I spoke to Kim recently, and the type of work we're involved in, why we'd want to get you on the pod and have a chat with you as well.
That is everything we're about. So the first question I'll ask you before we delve into your life is, what is mental strength to you?
So mental strength for me, I thought about this quite a lot before obviously we came on the podcast. So I think it's a few different things for me. It's about resilience, first of all. I think you need to be really aware of your sort of inner, what's the word I'm looking for? Your inner sort of triggers and things that have happened to you in the past that are going to impact you again. So you need to be aware of when you're feeling anxiety come on, or when you're feeling stressed, to be able to stop it before it gets out of control. And I think as well, you need to know how to tap into your inner calm. So it's about a few different things to me, not just being able to brush stuff off. Because obviously you're always going to have challenges, but it depends on how you deal with it.
Not just that deal with it thing, where sometimes that can be powerful. It can teach you, like, you know, what your limits are and all that kind of stuff, but actually knowing the signs then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what I work with quite a lot with clients, knowing the signs of things and learning from the past things that have happened and how that's made you stronger, like really just having self-awareness, really. What
sort of example comes to mind when you for that, for kind of the sort of signs of these problems?
So I would say it's like, I work with anxiety. So if somebody who's really had a bad time with anxiety, I would say that something like, you know, noticing the small things like they're struggling to concentrate, or they're sweating quite a lot of my clients get, or racing heart, or they're worrying and things are going from one thing to the next. And it's about being able to stop it. Every client's different with their first sign, so it's being aware of what their first sign is. Yeah. So, for example, when I used to suffer with anxiety, my first sign is that I would feel like my head was spinning and I couldn't think of the most simple thing. Yeah. So I learned to be able to recognise that.
Yeah, man's my neck starts at the back.
Really?
Yeah, I feel
pain
like
in the neck.
Yep. I know I'm a pain in the ass to a lot of people, but no, it is, and it's almost like, do you know when you're hunched for a while and you sat and your neck starts to hurt? It's that sort of feeling, and it runs down into my shoulders. And I first noticed it when I used to work in the police, stressed or under pressure. I used to think, and it was my neck. And now I know, right, I need to try and do something. That's really interesting. Yeah. So your journey, obviously your bio is, you built a lot on, I would say, empathy.
Yes.
And recognising through your own struggles how you can then flip that and help other people. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So your own struggles, can we go back to that if you don't mind talking about that? Yeah. So just talk about what you went through and how you've ended up on this journey now of NLP, hypnosis, and that journey.
Yeah. So a long time ago, before I ever had kids or anything like that, I was a national sales manager for a really high-pressured sales company. I worked for the head office. And I was to the point where, like, I wouldn't sleep at night. Like, I was being sick before meetings. Wow. Like, it was absolutely horrific. And it was the type of company where just before you were hitting your month, they'd move the target and then say that you didn't hit it.
Joy.
And it was absolutely the worst time ever. But I was sort of pulled in by the really good salary and the bonuses and sort of put up with it. Yep. And then I had a baby. And then after that, I realised I couldn't cope with being a new mum and having this really high-pressured job and also having to leave her to be away all the time. So I started getting to the point where I didn't want to get out of bed. I was just crying for absolutely no reason. A few times my husband come home from work and I was laid on the floor, shaking on the floor. Like, I was in a really, really bad place. I had a breakdown, I had to come off work. It was a really, really dark time. I ended up being at the point where I was having intrusive thoughts and that sort of thing. Like, it was really, really horrific.
So sorry to hear that. It's a horrible experience, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of people out there who find themselves in these types of roles where they've got to just feel like they continue on for all that. And it said you've had a baby, you've kind of got these other pressures, probably got a mortgage, got a house, and all that stuff going on. It's like the reality is this fixed point, it's the only thing you can see, right?
Well, I think it's that as well. And then you also don't want to admit to anyone that you're not able to cope. Because I felt a little bit like, well, other people do this job and they're fine. Other people are mums and they're fine. Like, why can't I cope?
Do you look back now and think, but whether?
No, but that's what I thought at the time.
Yeah.
I know that I should be able to cope.
Yeah.
And I was kind of scared to say to anyone that I wasn't.
Yeah.
So, it was a really difficult time, but I only really started to get better once I started to go into therapy. So I went to counselling, CBT and all these other therapies, and I thought it was fine.
How through your GP? Was that through
my GP,
right,
yeah. Okay. Through my GP, and I thought it was fine.
Yeah.
And then I realised that I actually just put sticky plasters over everything. Just put plasters over the little cracks and everything, and then it eventually all came back out again, but it got a lot worse.
Okay.
A few years later.
Just people often say this, we don't necessarily scratch the surface a little bit more on it. So when you say we're talking about mental health here, we're talking about anxiety particularly, I think. So when you say about putting sticky plasters over it, first of all, I would say the sticky plaster is what? The counselling, the therapy, so talking therapy. What is it putting the sticky? What is that? The nature of that sticking plaster? What does it cover up, and what's underneath it?
So for me, it was just dealing with the symptoms of it. So they were teaching me like how to calm down without having a panic attack, like how to feel calmer, different breathing techniques, that sort of thing. But they weren't actually talking to me about the root cause of what was causing my anxiety to allow me to get better. They just wanted to calm me down and give me medication to make me not feel. Okay. So I was on a lot of medication, and I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I just felt numb all the time.
So it didn't. So it for that period of time, it worked for that period of time.
Yeah, for that period of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you said that it got a lot worse years later. So you've had the seemingly help, your medication, the counselling, CBT, doctors. How did it manifest then years later? Because I'm taking that as you've just touched on it, you never actually tackled the real problem. So then years later it all came out again, but in worse. So explain that.
So years later, I actually started studying counselling by then. So I went off and I was doing counselling. I was in my first year of counselling, passed that and everything. And then I realised I had to do a year of hypnotherapy. And I was like, oh, whatever, I'll just do it, just get through it and that sort of thing. I had no interest at all.
As part of the counselling course?
Yeah, it was in the middle of your counselling course. And then when I started to study it, I had like a full-on like breakdown like within the first few weeks. But at the time I was also working for like a really big company in the area that have got a terrible work culture, and they're very much like, if you're having a bad day, they'd rather kick you off your chair and hide you under the desk and talk to you. So that the two together, I think the hypnotherapy was uncovering stuff, and then I had this really horrible toxic work environment as well. And I ended up going back down that horrible rabbit hole again, where I had a full-on breakdown again, and then I ended up being where I was like thinking about taking my own life, basically. I was that bad. So and that's where I discovered hypnotherapy. So while I was studying it, I realised I healed myself completely. And I got to the very bottom of my problems. Because
you're practicing on each other, on your fellow students.
Yeah. Kind of thing. You practice on each other, and you can do it to yourself.
So I want to come to that, but just what I'm really interested in right now is listening to you talk about what it's covering up. Now, without going into any details, that sticking plaster didn't didn't get that route. You used the word route. What was that route, and what was it that was missing from those initial treatments?
So they didn't really have any interest in talking to me about what was actually happening, like, you know, like how I felt and, you know, like what was happening in my life. They were just talking about the symptoms and all the time. They weren't interested in anything else. So there was a few things really causing it. It was, one of the things was I didn't know who I was once I had a baby, which I didn't realise. I completely lost my identity altogether. The other thing is I couldn't deal with the level of stress that I'd experienced before, and then I went back into a horrible environment that just triggered me back off again. Even though I wasn't in the same job anymore, but it was almost like having...
Matt's got this kind of dumb smile on his face at the moment. Apart from, he might need winding, I'm not sure. But I know exactly what
I think it's really interesting because you've clearly worked for 2 toxic employers.
Yes.
Excuse me. And I know we were talking off the mic there with the owner of this place and yourself around what is success to people, and I'm figuring you're on high salary.
Yeah.
So to people, it's like, well, you're on this money and this is it. But with that, unless you're in something you absolutely love, or you're in sport, or you're very lucky to be in that position, comes a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. And I think it's I was laughing not at your situation. I was reflecting on my own.
Yeah.
And working within the police, and toxic. I call it toxic well-being. It's well-being for well-being's sake, which makes it even more toxic. I would have preferred that there's no well-being here. Mm-hmm. We're all right at it. This is the process. It's not very good. I'd have accepted that. It's the falseness around it, and I think, is that something you faced as well?
Yeah, like I'll give you as an example. So like a company that I work for, obviously can't tell you who it is, but it's a very male dominated sort of like plant, shall we say, like type place. Mm-hmm. And I worked there, and I worked in a transport team, and I was doing a job that I was really, really overqualified for doing, but I just wanted a nice stress-free life while I was studying. And they had absolutely no mental health whatsoever. And I took a month off because I was really unwell, and I got told, well, we can't let you have a month off. No, who's going to do your job? You do 2 jobs. Like, who's going to do your job? I can't allow it. I'm not authorising it. But I just went anyway. And then when I got back, they basically told me that they didn't think I was capable as a person, as a mum, or as a person to work in their office, because I obviously have mental illness and issues. And they were putting me back on performance, and they'd have me out by the end of the month.
So,
like, it's absolutely disgraceful.
Yeah.
Like,
but probably when we strip down into that department, all them men are drinking every night, or, you know, have got their own issues going on, which they would never admit to. But do you know what, though? Something I've learned, something I was discussing this morning with a friend of mine who's on a similar journey to me, is I'm quite accepting now that what happened to me has happened to me, and I'm quite accepting to the fact that I've got PTSD, and I'm quite accepting to the fact that actually those experiences are a gift now. Yeah. And I really look at them experiences, and I suppose you do this, when you look back at that time, like, I don't recognise myself of how dark it got and how bad I was. I don't recognise the sorry, so much popped. I didn't. I don't recognise myself then, but I've been given a gift, and now what I can do is I can help people. Yeah. So it's something that you've done, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I help people in lots of different ways. I work with employers as well. So I go in and I educate the senior managers and stuff like that about anxiety, mental health, that sort of thing, and help them talk to the staff and recognise when they're having a hard time. Because that's just something that, and to be honest with you, I wouldn't even be bothered if I got paid for it, because I'm on a big journey to change the way people get trapped, because I don't think that it's just me. I think it happens everywhere. Yeah. And I think that's quite important that, you know, that people have more awareness, because I think a lot of employers are just ignorant. I don't think that they're particularly mean about it. I just think that they don't have any understanding.
I agree, and it comes in different shapes and forms as well. It's not always just like this straight up toxic culture as well. It can be anything from a single manager who just doesn't know how to handle you, doesn't get on with you, and actually got the wrong wind of you when they first started or whatever, and just actually wants to, for some reason they just don't sync, and actually they treat you differently. Well, there's all the way up to kind of just a really toxic like culture that goes on. Like Matt and I can both really relate to your story. We both had it. Like I lost a friend who died in a car accident, basically. And when I went at work, it was really odd because he was just a close friend, basically. He was my closest friend. And when I rang up to take time off work, the manager at the time said, "Oh, you're allowed any time off if it's only for like family." Like, and I was like, closest mate just died in a car accident really violently. And it's like, what do you want me to do? Like, I'm not really functioning here very well. Do you know what I mean? Like, they had to make a few calls and so on and come back to it. And it was this really weird thing about kind of, I was young and trying to figure out, well, I'm really struggling. I can't even put any thoughts together properly. I need some help. And it was 6 months before I actually opened up to getting some support myself. That stick and plaster went on. And then years later, realised there was a whole lot more going on. And it, there'd be more triggers.
I would advise any person in that position to walk away now. And I know there's pressures of earning and mortgages and kids and salaries. I understand that. But if you're working in an environment that is that toxic and it just has no appreciation whatsoever, I'd just be off now. I'd be like, right, cheers. Because I read something the other week that it was, and it was in particular around the police. And it sounds like where you used to work really is, if you leave or if you die, they are looking for a replacement straight away. And that is right. You are just. I've given my heart and soul to my job, and I know why you were saying you were feeling sick before your meetings, which meant you cared. But you are just a number, and I've accepted that now that you are, and I think it's really, really interesting to know how you are now through your journey and through your counselling journey. You've found what works for you and how you can help other people with that, and I think that's a really, really, really powerful thing.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So when you say hypnosis, NLP, psychological therapy, have you got more strings to your bow than that, or are they the three things that you focus on?
So they're the three things. So that's all covered by hypnotherapy. So they're the three techniques that you use inside. So at the moment, I'm a hypnotherapist, but I'm just about to qualify as a counsellor as well. So hopefully towards the end of next year, I'll be a counsellor as well. But I'm an anxiety specialist and burnout. So I deal with that one particular area.
So when you talk about anxiety and burnout, give us an example of someone presenting to you.
Okay.
Massive anxiety. What is the work that you undertake with that person?
It's all very individual, so it depends on what they're coming for. But for example, somebody who's come in and that's got really bad trauma, so maybe PTSD, like you mentioned, I would be taking them at different types of journeys depending on what they do. We do a consultation, but typical, for example, I do something called regression, which I don't know if you're aware of. A lot of people are really frightened when I say regression, but I do that, and that takes somebody back using it's called IMR, and that basically takes you back under hypnosis. So hypnosis is like a really deep daydream, and I take you back and help you discover what age you discovered trauma. So basically what we're doing is we get you really relaxed, and then I would ask you to count backwards from your age, and then you would lift your finger under the guidance of your subconscious and tell me where you've had some trauma. And then I would then use regression to take you back to that age, so we can look at it and we can reassess it and look at what's happening and try to heal you at the root of it. So say, for example, you had trauma when you were 5. I would take you back to that moment, but you would think you're 5. So you'd be talking to me, and you could even write and stuff as well if you wanted to. Mm-hmm. And we'd be talking about what's happening, but you would think that you're in that moment. And that's really important to be able to get you to identify what's happening and be able to move forward. So a lot of my clients have past things that have led to it. Some of them have numbers of different things, but some of them might just have one main thing. For example, I get a lot of people have had abuse, unfortunately, especially with their children. I get quite a lot of that.
Now, I know I've noticed you've got NLP on you. Anything. I've just qualified as a practitioner. Now it's something I really believe in very strongly. I think the modalities of that, with part of other things, are really important. But some of the things I was trained in is about low content as well. And I know that some counselling practices are heavily criticised through evidence about re-traumatising people. Now we've talked about re-traumatising, but is this different? Because from the outside, from how you describe it, so how is it different?
So it's different because you're taking them in from a safe place. So you're taking them in and observing from the outside. Then you would take them into the situation, but you're letting them know at all times that they're there as almost like a witness. Right. So they'll almost, like, easiest way to explain it to clients I say is, like when you watch that Christmas movie, I forgot what it's called, Scrooge. Right. And they go back into them scenes, don't they? And they do all the different things. It's a little bit like that. So you're stepping into a moment. But I always do, I'm sort of inner healing. So I do a lot of inner child stuff with people as well. So help them give the reassurance to that younger version of themselves that they're okay as an adult, and all the reassurance they need. They might need a cuddle or whatever. But you're not sort of taking them in there and making them relive everything. You're just there as an observer to be able to see it as it is.
When you get a client who, and some people I've worked with, actually, like, there's an assumption sometimes, obviously, you've got to look at kind of how far developed they are as an adult. Yeah. So if you're taking an adult back to sort of look through their childhood experiences through an adult pair of eyes, and actually how, it's a bit like that question, isn't it, right? So what would you say to your 5-year-old self now, sort of thing? Yes. But what if actually have you ever worked with any adults where their adult self still actually is quite underdeveloped, and actually they don't have those resources about actually what would I say? They don't have the answers. Is that ever a problem? I mean, does that make sense?
It does make sense. I have had an experience of it once, where they went back and they were with their younger self, and I said to them, say like whatever you need to say to them to be able to reassure them, and they said, I don't know what to do. Yeah. And then I made some suggestions of what they could do, and then they still weren't sure. So then we went on and did another session on what we think that could look like, what they needed as an adult, and what they think that would impact a child. And we did a lot more work on that, of a little bit more of awareness. That
is quite dissociated, quite powerful then. So it doesn't have to necessarily be about them. It's very much about kind of, it's almost like parent-child. It's like making you the parent of your own child, right?
Absolutely.
So that's dissociated. That's really powerful. Fantastic.
It's definitely the one that makes pretty much all my clients bawl their eyes out, but it's good because it lets them release that emotion.
Can we're going to take a quick break now, I think, but when we come back, I'll be really interested to hear about the comparison between that and what's available now if someone goes to their GP and asks for that by comparison, because this is where we're really passionate, aren't we, Matt, about. We've talked to a lot of people recently. I know myself, I'm pushing back against that changing that system and seeing more of the stuff which is really getting under the skin, like you said, to the root of that as well, which you sound very passionate about. Thank you, Kim. That's been a fantastic start. We'll go take a quick break.
Just a quick break from the pod, and an opportunity for us to thank our partners, Everyone Active. Everyone Active have numerous gyms and facilities across the Tees Valley area. Sign up with them today, get your memberships. Physical exercise, as we all know, has a massive positive impact on our mental health also. Back to the pod. Have you pressed record, Richard?
Pressed it.
Damn. Welcome back. Just had a little break. We were just talking in the break there around the hypnosis side of things, and we can't say for absolute 100%, but we're thinking it's not available through your GP. I think there needs to be a massive shift, doesn't there, in and around like different techniques, and I think GPs and that sort of world need to be a bit more open to helping people more, because we talk a lot on here, Rich, don't we, around going to see your GP as your first step. And I've said it time and time again, I had an horrendous experience with my GP. It was useless, if I'm honest. I wouldn't pay him in washes, to be fair, what he did for me and what he didn't do. But I think
I've been saying for 16 years, when I used to do men's health toolbox talks, I'd hear stories from different men, and I'd say, I think there was about 30,000 GPs in the UK, whatever, and I used to say, well, if you met one GP, you've only got 29,999 yet to meet, because the different experiences that men would get. And I think it's brilliant that you get one who, and I'd found that a lot of the younger GPs who would come through the system, even though you get like 1 day training on mental health, it's ridiculous how little training they get. It is actually insane. And none of that covers well-being side of things and, actually what's happened to you and kind of having those conversations. But I say you find GPs who are given like a speciality now. We're going to bring a GP back on again soon. Ali has to talk more about that. So, anyway, so yeah, more of a chat about that. But yeah, you're right, man. You were very lucky.
So how do you get referred work then? So now you have your own business.
Yeah.
And are you really busy, or are you just building that still, or how is that going?
I'm quite busy. I obviously take more clients all the time, but I'm completely self-employed. So I don't get anything from the NHS or anything like that. Everything I get is from my own stuff. So I do a lot of going out and meeting businesses and going out and networking and that sort of thing. I get a lot of referrals, to be perfectly honest with you. That's probably where about 90% of my business comes from. People tend to talk to each other when they've had a good experience. So I do tend to get a lot of referrals. So a lot of my clients are sort of high-level professionals, and I don't quite know how that happened, but I seem to get a lot of people in the same sort of profession. So I tend to get a lot of lawyers, a lot of senior accountants, a lot of solicitors, that sort of
So you've manifested it, I think, through your own experience and your own journey. Someone somewhere along the line has gone to you, right, we'll start giving these people to you so you can help them. That's what I think.
When someone tells word of mouth, it's usually because, so do you tend to talk to people, you tend to know a little bit about your story as well? Or is it like, you used to work in the job you shared earlier on, for example?
Yeah, I tend to naturally just talk about that when I meet people. Like, I like people to know that I know how it feels.
Rapport,
I know how it feels to have a panic attack and how it feels to be anxious and that sort of thing. Because I think if you don't tell people that, they just think that you're just preaching at them and you don't have a clue what you're talking about.
Right.
So I naturally talk about my story a lot.
Yeah. And it's actually, for me, that's back to that empathy thing. It's like you're actually trying to say, look, I'm not just here like across the table treating you. It's actually, I'm someone who understands. I've been there. However, like, I understand that your experience is unique to you, and that's what I'm here to guide you through. Brilliant.
So spiritual intuition. Talk to me more about that.
So this is only something I opened up about quite recently, because I don't know, people think, like I'm some sort of like white witch or something. So I am quite a spiritual person. I've always been that way. So I feel a lot of emotion from people, and I used to try and ignore it because it used to really freak me out. But I tend to find when I'm treating people that if I open that side up to me and I can feel their emotion and I can feel how they're progressing through the sessions, it helps me a lot more. So sometimes I'll be going through my session and I'll have it all planned out, and I'll suddenly just think and stop and think, no, they don't need that, they need this, and I just go with my gut feeling of what they need, and at 99% of the time it's exactly right. And I find that when I started accepting that, it worked better.
That's it, you've just said it. And actually, when you started accepting it, it worked better. So rather than sticking to the teaching all the time and just going, your instinct is going, it's not quite working, but you're going, well, it must be because it's worked for 95% of people, or whatever it might be. But you're going, hang on, no, I know this isn't. I need to try something different. And but using that feeling, that intuition, and that's what it is. And I think it's a natural empathy. It's a natural compassion that perhaps you only develop when you actually start doing this work from your own experience. But I don't know, you would tell us more, I suppose.
I think as well, like one of the things I didn't mention is when I have somebody laid on my sofa, like having therapy and stuff like that, I can see their energy. So I can see their energy flowing up their body, and I can see it changing. And I know that's really weird, but that guides me quite a lot as well. And that's something I just used to ignore. I really find that good.
Sorry to interrupt you.
It's all right.
On this, because I know that someone might be listening now and going, what are you on about? And Matt and I are sort of quite on board with this, and sort of like we are comfortable with it. But at the same time, others will be thinking and going, what do you mean you see the energy? So answer that for those people who might listen and go, what do you mean?
So for me, I know everyone is completely different how they see energy, but for me, I see it looks like almost like a I don't know how to explain it. Like almost like a smoky, like electricity that goes up the body. So normally, like when I'm getting people to relax, I get them to relax from their feet to the head. Every therapist is different, but that's how I do it. And I can see as they're relaxing, I can see the energy getting a bit like more built up and like more intense as it goes up their body. So it looks almost like they've got like a bit of smoke going over their body. And sometimes it looks like it's vibrating when it goes up, and I can see that. And throughout the whole session, once they're into hypnosis, sometimes if something doesn't sit quite right, or sometimes if some motion come out, you can see the build up of energy of that area.
And how much do you think is what you can actually see? Like, I do mean that. How much is it to do with feeling, and how much is it to do with, you think, perception based on your experience of all the signals, the verbal, the visual cues that people give you when they're reacting one way or another? Do you think it's a combination of all of that as well?
I do think it's a combination. I think that there's probably a lot more of the thing that where I can almost feel it and see it at the same time. So I don't know how to isolate them independently, but I think quite a lot of it comes from that. But you are right, you do get taught like how to recognise like eye cues and twitching and that sort of thing as well. And you can tell by the breathing and all that comes with experience and training. But a lot of it isn't something that comes from training, it's just something that I naturally see, but that was well before I ever did therapy.
So it's very much Reiki sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Trapped energies, shifting energy. Yeah, I used to get Reiki out, and that it's an amazing gift. And I think instead of feeling that you shouldn't be doing it, keep doing it, because it is an amazing gift. Moving on through your journey, then, do you find that? I mean, through everything that you've been through, and you're trying to help employers now, and does doing what you do help you?
Yes.
In what way?
A little bit of it strokes your ego, I'm not going to lie, because, you know, you like to see people get better and you think, you know, I help with that. But I also like to think, you know, that people that are just like me, that are getting through and being able to get on with their lives, and that's quite nice to be able to see someone that were coming in, having panic attacks, trying to talk to me in their first session, to being able to be really, really confident and, you know, go on and do whatever they want to do with their life and almost pick their life back up. That's quite a nice thing to experience as well.
Good on you. And pick their life back up. Pick their life back up. They pick it back up. And I talk about it, like, this is a big deal for me, like, personally. I love to hear when people talk like that, because it's like, it says a lot about kind of, you're not just running someone through a mill, like a conveyor belt of treatment. You actually watching them pick themselves, the empowering nature of it as well. That's a thing about being an empath, isn't it? About the empathy. It is.
And I think there's a lot of adults who don't deal with their trauma or deal with whatever's got going on. And I always think that that's really resonated with me, actually, just picking your life back up and taking some control back and going, right, actually, that happened to me, but I need to sort that out because it's affecting all of this as well. And picking your life back up, that saying is really powerful. And to be part of that journey must be good for you.
Absolutely. And it reminds me sometimes of how far I've come. I can see it in my own clients, and that probably sounds like quite self-centered, but I think, you know, like when I see people progressing quite long, sometimes I'll sit back and, you know, like reflect on my like client stuff, and I'll be like, you know what, though, you were once on that path, and like I'm proud of you for how far you come. Do you know what I mean? And yeah.
But
sorry, Rich, come.
So do you tend to support men and women both, or is it like 50-50? Is more women come your way?
No, and more men.
More men.
Which I was really surprised about, actually, because of the stigma of men. Men don't talk, men don't have therapy, that sort of thing. But I naturally attract more men than women.
So, and do they stick around? I mean, what's your success rate like for the work? Do you have to refer others on elsewhere sometimes, occasionally?
I'm not allowed to say what my percentages are and stuff like that. I'm not allowed to. I have to sign to say I'm not allowed. But I do sometimes refer people on. So I'm dead honest. Like, if there's something that someone's come in with and I can't help them with, I'll be really upfront and say to them. But a few people like that I couldn't help, people that have had things like bipolar and that sort of thing, which I'm not allowed to touch. But most of the time, most people leave me and then they go on and, you know, get back on with their life. But sometimes I'll tell them, you know, like, I think it'd be a good idea if you maybe went and seen a psychologist or whatever. Everyone's different. But I do tend to find that a lot of people want to stick around with me after they've had therapy. Right. So I do tend to get a lot of people stay with me, and they'll want to work on the mindset for goals, or they'll want to just do monthly relaxation, just because they find that coming to see me for that hour a week or a month, whatever, is their safe space for them to be able to work on themselves. So you do tend to find that people stick about.
Do you see if someone turns up with a certain label diagnosis, for example, you can't work with them at all?
I can't work with anything that is seen as psychiatric. So we're not allowed under our ethics as hypnotherapists. Because we're helping to make new pathways in the way that people think. And when somebody's got a diagnosis like that, we're not allowed to. So that we have to refer them onto a psychologist. But that's just hypnotherapy. That's the way that we're all our ethics that we have. I don't necessarily agree with it, to be honest. But we have to, you know, abide by these things and get struck off. So
I know, and hypnotherapy isn't available generally on the NHS. Look there's a NHS site that talks about hypnotherapy and what you can expect from it, which is great. You know, it's on there, and they're obviously saying, look, this is what you can expect and so on, but it's not available on the NHS for whatever reason. And yet, at the same time, we've interviewed Dr. Ian Caldwell, had a whole conversation about labels and the embodiment of labels. Now, there are clearly those people who it takes a long time to get a psychiatric diagnosis, for example. These things don't happen overnight, that's for sure. They're not, you know, we should treat them very seriously. However, what if someone came to you and said, look, I've got all that, I'd sign whatever, I've heard you're really good, I want to try it, I've got this other diagnosis, but you're still not allowed to, even though they consent?
Unfortunately not. So I've had a few people like that
Yep.
over the last couple of months. Actually, I had a little bit of an influx of people with psychiatric, and I'm not sure why that was, but and I had quite a few people with personality disorders, and I'm not allowed to work with them. And they were wanting to come to me because they had problems with anxiety, and they wanted to just not talk about their personality disorder whatsoever. They just wanted to talk about their anxiety, and I still wasn't allowed to help them, and that didn't sit right with me.
Ooh. My bed's going all over the place.
That's another issue. I just want to touch back on do you get more men? And I'm wondering, is that I would prefer to speak. If I was to get help, I would prefer to be female. I think it's probably a motherly thing. The energy is different. It's females have a lot more empathy and a lot more. I'll go back to motherhood natures. Mm-hmm. Do you find that? Do you think that that's potentially why you get more men?
I think so, but I think that they go back to the referral thing as well. I think when a couple of men have been to see him and they've made some really good progress, they tend to tell people. But I tend to find as well that they're not as worried about, like breaking down and getting upset and, like going into the ins and outs of everything. I think a lot of men, when I've spoken to them, are worried about being judged by other men if they're, like come out with all the different feelings and the problems that they're having.
I can relate to that at some point.
Yeah.
Sure.
But being an empath.
Yeah.
So I once got told that I needed to close my lighthouse up almost because I was like this and I was attracting, without knowing, the bad energy comes to your good energy and all of that. And
everything else in between.
And so I purposely now close mine up. I open it when I want to the people I want to, then I close back up. So being an empath, as you are, as I am, as Richie is, it must be draining.
It is.
For you. So what? Yeah. So sorry, just talk about that side of it. But then, so how do you pull yourself back round to good energy again then? Because if you're dealing with, say, 2 or 3 clients a day, and it's heavy, and then you're a mum and you're a wife and you're doing everything else, and how does that then balance itself back out? So
I kind of learned the hard way about this. So I didn't learn when I was doing training, because when you're doing training, you don't really deal with anything major. Everything's very light. So I had a client and they were very, very anxious. I'm probably the most anxious person that I dealt with at that point. And I felt like I was being suffocated when I was in the room with them. And then when I left the room, I still felt the same. Like I felt like I was being weighed down. And it took a lot out of me, and I didn't know what was happening. And I tried everything, I tried meditation, tried going for a walk. I couldn't shake it. I had to get sort of guidance from, we have supervision, like for our practice. I had to get guidance from my supervisor. And I basically found out that I was doing what you just said there. I wasn't closing myself down. I was being completely open, letting them offload all their emotion onto me, person after person. And it really floored me. So it made me almost take a little bit of a step back and think, oh my God, that can never happen again. But then I had that client a week later, so I had to basically figure out very quickly how to stop it happening again. And I'll be honest, I was a bit anxious when I was going to see them, because I thought, I can't handle that again,
So it's a vicarious trauma thing, isn't it? It's taking on other people's traumas. And
it is. And there's a whole branch to that. And this is why when I saw, when did you do NLP then?
So you do NLP part of your hypnosis
training.
No
kidding. Really?
So you don't learn to be a practitioner. You learn a lot of techniques.
Yes.
And we can learn as many techniques as we want, but we can't call ourselves a practitioner.
Okay.
But I would like to be a practitioner, actually.
I mean, I certainly put you in touch with the wonderful Alan Johnson, who's come back on the podcast soon, who's trained us as a practitioner. I'm just pissed off. I'm sat in, I'm pissed off. I'm pissed off, Matt, because I keep hearing the story after story about kind of like, you can't work with people because they've had a diagnosis. Like, what the fuck sort of shit is that? Like, I get it. And I'm just, I don't know if I'm speaking for anyone else here, but I don't really care. I feel like you fucking hear all these conversations all the time about kind of, I've been given this, I'm on this medication. So when it's actually all they're doing, and all the stories I hear, see so many stories coming out of secondary care, mental health, where people have become more screwed over by it, okay? And it does happen. It's a really screwed up system sometimes. When it works well, it works very well. It does. But so many people go through that, they end up re-traumatized, end up like owning sort of identity labels throughout. It's horrendous. And do you know what it is? They end up believing that they've got something like an illness, like they can be observed. The vast majority, I can't say it again, the vast majority of these aren't even neurologically observable, but it's just embodied in a series of behaviours and experiences and perceptions that basically become this, but by owning it, they can't then get some other therapy. When we say, well, find what works for you, well, great, until you get to the point where it says, where Kim, quite rightly, by your own guidance, by being in hypnotherapy, has to turn people away who could be quite effective, yet better judgment. It just pisses me off.
Let's discuss it. So is it to protect yourselves?
Yeah, so we probably like yourself with NLP, we have like a code of ethics. So we're part of like different registrations. So I'm part of the National Hypnotherapy Society, and I have to sign to be under their guidance. And we have certain things that we can do and certain things we can't. So basically it's to protect ourselves, but I don't agree with it. But then I have to be registered with someone to be a hypnotherapist to be allowed to treat people. So there isn't one that helps you treat people like that.
Because when we talk about anxiety, surely that's born out from some sort of mental health problem, which could be trauma, it could be...
Itself is diagnosed.
Yeah, so I really struggle. I'm like you. I understand that, but I also...
But anxiety itself can be extremely disabling.
Yeah.
Like severe anxiety is like...
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like you're talking about things like obsessive compulsive disorder and all these different types of anxiety disorders that exist that can really and they're often in combination with depression and other types of mental health problems. So if someone came to you with diagnosis of severe anxiety, as an anxiety specialist, presumably that's okay.
Yeah.
But there's a list of certain less common, more serious disorders, like you said, that you can't work with.
It's basically anything psychiatric.
Anything.
So basically anything that you would have to go into a mental health hospital for, we can't treat. And I agree, I sometimes think I wish I could just start my own registration, or I could just, pretend I didn't hear them and just treat them anyway, but then it's not worth losing what I do,
Oh, you're quite right. I get and I understand that. I genuinely do understand that.
I think the last thing I'll say on this, I'm not qualified enough to even give what.
Well, I'm just an idiot with a certificate.
But I'm not qualified enough to speak about it because I don't know the full ins and outs and I don't know the understanding of that. But I think there's a lot of blockages in the mental health system that stops people getting the help that they need and the help they deserve, I think. So we've talked about your lighthouse, having to close up, having to really be... so your self-awareness is high. Mm-hmm. What do you do now then, away from your work, to regulate yourself, and what do you do that works for you?
So I do a lot of the techniques that I teach clients. So you'll know about this, Richard, I do a lot of anchoring and stuff like that. I do a lot
Richard,
of...
it is a Sunday, to be fair. I'm getting my Sunday name.
And then I do a lot of daft things, like I'll go, if I'm feeling particularly, stressed out or anything from my day, I'll go walk around the park in the mud. I know that sounds a bit mental, but a bit of grounding, that sort of thing. I do a lot of recalling my memories as well. So I do a lot of thinking about nice things that have happened to me in my life, or I'll look at photos or videos. I have a little collection, a little box that I use. Or even just silly things like I'll ring my mum, or I'll ring one of my friends and just have a completely pointless chat about everyday general stuff. Like my mum will talk to me about things that have been on TV that I probably don't care about, but it's just everyday mundane stuff, and I think really helps. So it depends. Some clients I don't have to do it, but then others I feel the need. I always now give myself a break in between clients. I never used to do that. I used to do back to back to back to back, but I don't do that now. I need at least sort of half an hour to an hour. And if I have a particular client that I know is really struggling, I will give myself, maybe put them at the end of the day and give myself that time.
So how is your mental health now?
My mental health is good, but it takes dips like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
You can have bad days, bad months, whatever. There's still things come up in life, don't there, that you're not expecting.
Yes.
But I think the most important thing is knowing how to get yourself back on track.
Yeah. So would you? So you take your own advice?
Sometimes, not all the time.
I'm the world's worst for that.
Human after all. Well, this is interesting. I do like to get into my own little things. I get into a routine, drop the routine. Get into a routine, drop the routine. Remind myself what worked, forget what worked. Remind myself, and so on. And this is the rhythm that I'm in. But I do know what works for me. Whether or not I always take that advice, whether it's diet, whether it's exercise, whether it's the spiritual, the connections, all that stuff. But no one has to be perfect, do we? And it's but I do find that when you actually do follow that good advice, it's like things do go easier, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And
They do.
but again, life gets in the way, doesn't it? And
does.
life is busy. And if we were all walking around in a spiritual bubble, you know, meditating every 5 minutes, and we it's not realistic. But we talk a lot about, and I'm going to ask you in a minute if you give one piece of advice just to someone, and this is probably relevant to it as well, as it's finding out what works for you, what we talk about, what works for you, and how quickly you can get that background. So you might go 2 or 3 days and think, I need to dig. You know what your go-tos are. It's when people don't know, or what they think works doesn't, such as drugs, alcohol, you know, violence, whatever that may be. So what is the one piece of advice you would give? Because that's what I would always say to people, is just find what works and go with it.
Probably quite similar to what you're saying, really. But I always talk to clients a lot about their awareness of themselves. So, you know, like what I talked about earlier about people's triggers, and, you know, like when you're having a bad day, like when you're having a good day. So I encourage a lot of people to journal. Right. So I'll ask them, you know, like when they're having a really bad day, just write down without any judgment at all. It's like a little bit of free writing. Just scribble down until your pen stops. Don't read it back. Just get it all out. And then I'd ask them to keep doing it on good days and watch for their patterns of, like, you know, what it is that's setting them off and what it is that's making you feel really good, and do more of just what's making you feel good. And I always think as well, like, your feelings are very temporary. So if you're having a really bad day, it's not going to be like that forever, you know.
Do you know one of the things I asked that I'm involved with a journal project at work. We've talked about it before, and we'll bring Joe back on at some point as well. When I first started journaling with an older journal, before I got one of Joe's journals, I was like, what am I supposed to write? And I don't know if this is a bloke thing. It's like, well, ask me a question, I'll give you an answer. But if so he had journal prompts in his journal, like pages of them for different reasons. So it might be like about your day, about your family, about your career, about whatever is going on, all these different aspects of life. And it'd be like, and it just asks you a question, and it's like, write down, and it's brilliant. But I wasn't sure if it was a bloke thing. My instinct was it probably was, like, because we're not naturally, well, generally, but this is not something that perhaps we're as comfortable with. I'm not speaking for every bloke, but that was me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've had guys say to me, well, I don't know what to write.
Right.
And sometimes I'll say to them, like, you know, like, get something like that. So I used to have that when I first started with journaling, because I was the same. I was like, I don't know what to put.
Right.
Or I couldn't be bothered. I used to think it was a bit of a task. But then I say to some people, you know what, are you any good at talking? Yeah. And I'd say to them, right, okay, when you're on your way to somewhere, or if you know, have a 5 minutes spare, or if you're on the loo or whatever, just do a recording on your phone.
Not on the loo. Run out of paper, your journal down toilet.
No, like on your phone, like rather than a paper one. But, you know, just record something. And it's really just about unloading your emotion, isn't it? And, you know, like, that's the most important thing. So it doesn't have to be written down. It can literally just be, you know, you talking into your phone.
So it's techniques again, isn't it? It's that, what is it that works? So from a selfish point of view, I've managed to gain a lot of control back in my life, which I haven't had for a long, long time. And I've gone term time only. Mm-hmm. So this week, selfishly, I'm doing what works for me and what I've missed. So, like, finding that opportunity to get on my bike, walk the dog, go for a big walk, not just a 10-minute walk. I'm trying to do a couple of hours a day and get out of my car and go and, like, this morning, go to the beach and stuff. So it's just finding that one thing, isn't it? But yeah. I think we're going to, I mean, this could go on for another 3 hours and it'd be really interesting, but we're going to start to close up. But one thing I want to say to you is, I think you're doing amazing. And I think from what you've said, the first time I've ever met you, and what you've said you've been through and working in them toxic working environments, to, like, getting what you thought was help and actually it wasn't help at all. But where I find you're amazing is you've really took what worked for you, and now you're trying to help other people, and I think that's fantastic.
I just want to add to that a little bit, is that when you said that it didn't work at all, I don't think you actually meant that. I think basically every step is a step towards the thing you got that worked for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I just think, like, yes, at least put the sticking plaster on, and for some people that can keep them alive.
Yeah.
And it's important to say, and I go back to things like antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication can be the difference to get people through that day, through that week, that next month. What it ain't meant to be necessarily, according to science, is something like a long-term solution, right? So, but is that fair to say those were important steps to happen on your journey?
Yeah, I think I agree with both of these, actually. But, like, yeah, I could have done with the hypnotherapy at the beginning,
right?
to get right to the main cause and clear up straight away. But I do think that like all the things I went through, like I was still a mess underneath, but I was at least still able to get up and take my daughter to nursery and being able to like just get on with my life and rather than having to be on the sick and stuff straight away. So it did get me through, but I think that it could have been better. I think I could have had better therapy.
Yes.
But obviously it's about being aware of what therapy worked for me, isn't it? At the time, I didn't even know about hypnotherapy. I just seen stage stuff and thought it was like a magic show.
Another lesson, stay open-minded, keep looking. And this is back to what we keep saying, which is find out what works for you. I knew, Kim, when we were chatting, when we met before, that you'd have a lot to share and a lot of wisdom. And it's been phenomenal to listen to you kind of being open today. And thank you for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And bringing along today. It's just been a great interview. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
We will no doubt touch base and thanks again to the Artisan for hosting us today. See you at the next one.